Lesson 116a, Peace on Earth. Teachings from the encyclical Pacem in Terris of Pope John XXIII, dated April 11th, 1963. Introduction. Order in the Universe. Peace on earth can be firmly established only if the order laid down by God be dutifully observed. O Lord our Master, the majesty of thy name fills all the earth. Part 1. Order between men. Every human being has rights and duties. Rights include those to life and worthy standard of living, freedom of religion and association, freedom of speech and the right to search for truth, the right to free initiative in the economic field and the right to work, and the right to emigrate and immigrate. But those who claim their own rights yet altogether forget or neglect to carry out their respective duties are people who build with one hand and destroy with the other. Political society should be based on truth and the moral order. Any human society that is established on relations of force must be regarded as inhuman, inasmuch as the personality of its members is repressed or restricted, when in fact they should be provided with appropriate incentives and means for developing and perfecting themselves. In addition, the people of one country or ethnic group should not be subject to political powers located outside. Racial discrimination can no longer be justified, at least doctrinally and in theory. Part 2. Relations between individuals and the public authorities. Legitimate authority comes only from God. Where the civil authority uses as its only or its chief means either threat and fear of punishment or promises of reward, it cannot effectively move men to promote the common good of all. Authority is chiefly concerned with moral, not physical force, and no one may be coerced to perform interior acts. If a human society is not based on the moral order, and if it does not recognize that the source of its authority is God, its laws and actions are not binding on the consciences of its citizens. This means that, if any government does not acknowledge the rights of man or violates them, it not only fails its duty, but its orders completely lack juridical force. The common good is best preserved where free enterprise in the economic order prevails. For this principle must always be retained, that state activity in the economic field ought not to be exercised in such a way as to curtail an individual's freedom or personal initiative. Rather, it should work to expand that freedom as much as possible by the effective protection of the essential rights of each and every individual. The same form of government is not prescribed for all. So long as authority is recognized as coming from God, and so long as the moral order is observed, it is in keeping with their dignity as persons that human beings should take an active part in government, although the manner in which they share in it will depend on the level of development of the political community to which they belong. Part 3. Relations between states. Relations between states must be based on the moral law. Each state has the right to existence, to self-development. On the international level, one state may not develop itself by restricting or oppressing other states. There are countries with an abundance of arable land and a scarcity of manpower, while in other countries there is no proportion between natural resources and the capital available. This demands that people should set up relationships of mutual collaboration, facilitating the circulation from one to the other of capital, goods, and manpower. Disagreements must be settled, not by force, nor by deceit or trickery. What a sad plight is that of the phenomenon of political refugees, a phenomenon which has assumed large proportions and which always hides numberless and acute sufferings. Pope John deplores the enormous stocks of armaments that have been and still are being made on the grounds that peace cannot be preserved without equal balance of armaments. Consequently, people live in constant fear lest the storm should break upon them. Justice, right reason, and humanity urgently demand that the arms race should cease. Nuclear weapons and nuclear tests undertaken with war in mind should be banned. Because liberty is just as important as peace, relations between states should be based on freedom, that is to say, that no country may unjustly oppress others or unduly meddle in their affairs. Part 4. Relationship of men and of political communities with the world community. The Holy Father calls for the establishment of a new world public authority, set up by common accord and not imposed by force, but he does not have in mind a world government. The difficulty is that there would be reason to fear that a supranational or worldwide public authority, imposed by force, might be or might become an instrument of one-sided interests. Thus sovereign states are right in not easily yielding in obedience to an authority imposed by force, or to an authority in whose creation they had no part, or to which they themselves did not decide to submit by conscious and free choice. Indeed, the confederate public authority of the world, which should recognize the principle of subsidiarity just as it should be recognized within states, is not intended to limit the sphere of action of the public authority of the individual community, much less to take its place. Its sole task is to promote human rights and security of individual states. It is the earnest wish of Pope John that the United Nations, in its structure and in its means, may become ever more equal to the magnitude and nobility of its tasks, and that the day may come when every human being will find therein an effective safeguard for his rights. Part 5. Pastoral Exhortations. Catholics are called on to work with non-Catholics and Christians with non-Christians. Even historical movements based on error may change. Thus it may be opportune to draw nearer or hold meetings with such movements. But to decide whether this moment has arrived, and also to lay down the ways and decrees in which work in common might be possible for the achievement of economic, social, and cultural and political ends, which are honourable and useful, these are the problems which can only be solved with the virtue of prudence, which is the guiding light of the virtues that regulate the moral life, both individual and social. Salvation and justice are not to be found in revolution, but in evolution through concord. Violence has always achieved only destruction, not construction. The kindling of passion, not their pacification, the accumulation of hate and ruin, not the reconciliation of the contending parties. And the Pope concludes, however, peace will be but an empty-sounding word unless it is founded on the order which this present document has outlined in confident hope, an order founded on truth, built according to justice, vivified and integrated by charity, and put into practice in freedom. Upon all men of good will to whom this encyclical letter is addressed, we implore from Almighty God health and prosperity.